Welcome to Down the Garden Path. I'm your host, Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and plant lover. I enjoy discussing down to earth tips and advice to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. And I also aim to bring you interesting and relevant topics to educate you all about the landscaping and horticultural industry. To another episode of Down the Garden Path. I'm your host, Joanne Shaw, and thank you very much for listening. Today, I welcome a fellow landscape designer, Rita Nugent, to our show to talk about landscape design. Rita graduated with a diploma in landscape design from the University of Guelph in 2016. Using Dynascape software, she has created over 700 computer software designs encompassing all sizes and types of property in Southern Ontario. Her professional interest is the fruition of many years of working and learning in her own garden in the Toronto area. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joanne. Great pleasure to be here.
Yes. So even though you gave me that little teaser about, how your journey started, I always like to ask people about your journey to becoming a landscape designer. How did it go from working in your own garden to deciding to go back to university?
Well, it was a number of years, decades even. I live in a very typical suburban area in the West GTA. As a homeowner, I was very happy to be able to move into a large property, large by my standard anyway, a large suburban property, and with it some mature tree stock, a lovely house, but oh my goodness, the problems I had to deal with. And this is kind of what informs a lot of my work now, is the problems that I had making a garden space happen in my own experience. I'm able to translate that into what I do for many homeowners in the Toronto area and Southern Ontario as well, because I have quite a large reach from a design perspective. I do work well out of the area as well through virtual means. To answer your question, I found myself, as many people do, with compacted soil due to the nature of how housing surveys are built, and wondered, why isn't this stuff growing? Why is this going wrong? And learning really, quite literally from the ground up, what was going wrong, and eventually, and over time, and certainly many mistakes, was able to remedy it and come up with reasonable solutions. And not only just temporary solutions, I mean permanent solutions, because I had larger trees that were growing up. I had a pool area. I had children and pets to accommodate. All of these factors went into that kind of learning process for me.
Wow, that is great. Yeah, I can totally relate to that, and how the garden evolves. It's not how we design it is not how it's going to stay, right? Things change.
Absolutely.
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 So is your business design only?
Yes, for all intent and purpose, it is design only. Now, I find that people contact me for work. They have a project in mind. They understand, probably from doing other forms of renovation, usually inside the house, that you really have to think things through and get things to paper. And, that's the only way to control a project ultimately. Cost-wise, it certainly puts you in a position of strength with contracting, to have a design that's complete, where almost all of the important decisions are certainly made. And then you can tender out, your square footage, for purposes of, mulch and plant spaces. The plants are predetermined in a list. I draw to mature size, so we're not talking about just the short term, we're talking about the long term. We're talking about balancing spaces. I take a holistic approach where I'm concerning the whole space, not just, the plant beds or anything. I often design properties for the short term, in the sense that people want to stagger projects. They can't commit to a big project right now. They've got a front yard, they've got a backyard. Let's do some of it. Let's talk about that pool later on when the kids are older. We'll use part of the backyard space for, recreation, sandbox, swings. And then when that equipment leaves, we'll talk about a pool. We'll have the money for it then.
Yeah.
And then we'll have thought these things through and not planted and done things ahead of time that are going to cost us a lot of trouble and time to remove.
Yeah, that's good. So even though it's design only, you do look at hardscaping in addition to the gardens.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, living spaces, right? That's where people live.
Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to design, draw in hardscaping as well as deck spacing, mindful of the fact of how traffic flows, what people do in their backyards, why an entertaining space should be as close to the kitchen as possible, all sorts of factors. I'm really not a problem solver so much as trying to maximize the potential of a space. Although I do a lot of troubleshooting too, and I notice things beyond the immediate space, and that's something that people don't always do. They think, what's in their property line is really their own consideration, and yeah, it is what they own, but there's other factors outside of that space that really need consideration sometimes.
Yes, that's true. So as part of on your website, you mentioned about custom design services and offering on-site consultation and virtual design. So
yes.
Tell me, so I'd love to know how you work that, yes, with our new world of virtual.
Well, the virtual was something that came about thanks to the COVID pandemic. And as we all know and remember well, in 2020, we were pretty much confined to quarters. And in the design world, of course, that was really kind of awkward because designers like yourself and myself were certainly in the habit, and no one would question this. You went to a client's property, you measured, you spoke to the client, you did everything, with boots on the ground. Suddenly we couldn't do that. In fact, we couldn't, through Sheridan, and I believe you have experience through Sheridan as well, we were being sent on calls to do this kind of work. We couldn't even accept payment. And it was a really difficult time. So it was suggested, if designers wanted to and had the means to, and by the way, I was able to accept the offer to do virtual work because of the fact that I had already completed and was quite proficient in Dynascape software. I was in the habit of sending emails to people with my, first draft and following up that way. So I was already electronically on board. A lot of designers, I believe, were still doing what they had been trained to do, which was arrive on site, with a measuring tape, clipboard, grid paper and drawing it out and doing it by hand.
Yeah.
Because of my training through the University of Guelph, I was required to learn Dynascape, and I took 2 courses in it and had to develop proficiency just to meet my requirements to graduate.
Yeah.
So happily, this all fit really well at a very difficult time. So I was able to do the work from home the way I was pretty well already doing it, and extend my reach as well. I wasn't just going to my local area or places I would have driven to within half an hour. I could now take work from people who could send me their information, send me their measurements, sometimes in the form of their property survey or whatever they had on hand. And I was able to do a lot of work simply because I was able to access Google Earth, which, was really a wonder at the time to be able to take satellite imagery and use that and measure from it, not, to a certain precise point, but certainly a good enough measure in many cases.
Oh, you might have to teach me that, because I've struggled with that, especially for pools, right? Those existing pools. Oh my gosh, I want Google Earth to work for me. So I'll follow up with you about that one. But yes, Google Earth was like to see the trees and to see the front yards, and it transitioning for our industry was pretty smooth, wasn't it?
It was, and it was a very confusing time in so many
For
ways.
sure.
So this was something we all had to kind of adjust to and to
Yeah.
see if it worked. And happily I was able to make it work. I didn't expect it to last. Honestly, I thought once the pandemic was over, everything would go back to normal. But instead, it's about 50% of my business. And still
Really?
continues to be, yes, because I do the electronic, my email designs. I converse with the customer over email or telephone conversations. It's become very, very easy, and it works for a lot of people simply because they don't have a lot of time, and they're working sometimes, outside of the country, and
Oh, okay.
it certainly is an amazing time where we as customers and clients can we can connect with our group in new ways that we couldn't foresee even 5 years ago.
Wow. So do the clients send you photos? Like
Yes.
I take so many photos when I'm there, like of every nook and cranny, right? And there I still miss the one. There's always one where like, oh, where was
Hmm.
that window well? And so
Hmm.
yeah, so do you I guess it really relies on the client, right? To take all
It
those
does.
photos.
Hmm. Well, essentially, the virtual is them sending me the information and me backing it up with a Google search. And
Okay.
then, if I fall short in the information, I just contact them and we work something out and we figure it
Okay.
out.
Okay.
Um, I still do site consultation where I go to the site. I have the interview with the client. I use a laser measure, no tape measures for me, which is
Oh,
very
okay.
useful.
What are you using?
A Bosch, little, it's like the size of an old video camera. Hang on, I might have it handy. Yes,
Oh,
here it is.
okay.
And
I didn't think you could use those outside. Like I know you can use them inside because it's wall to wall, but you can use it outside?
oh, yes, yes. Now, it may let you down with distances. Sorry.
That's
It may
okay.
let you down with distances, but for the most part, it's a very useful tool. And so, I can do my measure very quickly. And, it's a great tool. It took me a little while to learn, but it was
Yeah.
certainly a worthwhile thing.
No, when you say it lets you down with distances, like what do you mean? Like what are you measuring walls? Are you measuring like the back fence?
Yes. Well, if I'm standing at the back of a house and getting a corner house property measured to the property line where the fence ends, if it's more than about 100 feet,
Oh,
I may have to find another way, but you always
yeah.
have to bounce the laser off of a vertical surface, if you see what I mean. There's a few
Oh, okay.
tricks
So
to
you can
it.
go
Yeah.
from like if it's within 100 feet, you can go from the corner of the house to the fence. The fence is
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And
So
do you do anything for grades? Like I use a zip level for grades.
I don't get into grading so much. I
Okay.
do try to note it where it's going to impact a design, looking for a drop, and sometimes I can get a pretty good idea off the fence line, to be honest with you. So that's low tech, of course, but
Yeah.
it's an eyeball measurement, really.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm excited. So it's a Bosch measuring laser.
Hmm.
Okay. Let our listeners know about that.
I think
That's
I got
great.
it from Home Depot or Rona. Those
Okay.
kind of stores would sell it. You could probably buy it on Amazon too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to go back just quickly to the virtual one. So how do customers do it? Like do you feel like they really get it and they get the right amount of measurements and photos to you or do you find that there is a bit of back and forth or have you come up with like a way to train them to know what to take pictures of?
Yes, experience is always, an informative thing and will help me with the next customer for sure. Um, Most people will contact me through my website, through Squarespace. Sometimes they don't know if they want a virtual design or they need a
Mm,
site
yeah.
consultation. We talk about that. I usually ask them to send me pictures first, and then we come to a decision
Okay.
and then proceed from there. And if there's a site visit to be had, I set up an appointment and, I try to go midday, when the sun is out and
Hmm.
you can see the space adequately, of course. In the case of virtual, people will certainly send me documentation like surveys if they have them, or measurements they've taken themselves. They will send me photographs. Sometimes they'll send me video even, so on and so forth. And then, I proceed with that. I also always consult Google from Google Earth or Google, just a typical search, street addresses, just to see what I
Yeah.
can see, usually at the front. I want to be aware of things that are around the property.
Yeah, because the neighbor stuff, right? Sometimes, like the tree, I
Absolutely.
mean, they might not have any trees and they might say they have no shade, but then the neighbor's trees, right? And
Yeah, there's a lot of issues that come up
Mhm.
as well. And then, if a property borders not necessarily another homeowner, but say conservation property or municipal property, that's a consideration sometimes that people should be aware of, because if they're planning a big project, renovation project, in the backyard and they back onto conservation property, conservation will require them to support conservation's imperatives, meaning that, and this usually applies to larger properties, of course,
Right.
that you as a homeowner will be required to plant native property, or sorry, plants along your side of the fence to
Yeah.
support what conservation is attempting to do to support wildlife and
Mhm.
sustainability and so on and so forth. Sometimes
Mhm.
people don't know that. And where it comes up is in larger projects often, where permits and contracting is all underway and somebody in the neighborhood doesn't like it and phones conservation, and suddenly there's a stop work order.
Mhm.
So, if I'm the first person on site, or virtually or otherwise, I can usually advise on those things and do a fair bit of troubleshooting ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah, we are problem solvers, aren't we? Like, I mean, I know
Absolutely.
that, like, we're viewed as landscape designers, and people are, worried about the pretty plants and things like that, or the what color deck should we do, right? Or what material should we use for our deck? But aside from all those little things, our experience and our overall bird's eye view of the whole project is invaluable, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. I have been able to connect larger homeowners with opportunities that they probably would never be aware of. For example, and this applies all over the GTA and probably all over Southern Ontario, municipalities are trying very hard to increase their tree canopy, because trees are valuable. They're the mitigators of flooding in the future. They store carbon. We want more trees. In Mississauga, for example, there's a 10-year plan to plant 1 million trees. They've got to 600,000. They want
Wow.
to put another 400,000 in the ground in the next 6 years. So there's been an initiative to connect with larger homeowners, or property owners rather, who have lots of space and probably would be interested in planting those trees. This
Really?
kind of initiative. And it's not just larger homeowners, it's certainly people more likely a typical homeowner who wants one tree, perhaps,
Mhm.
and maybe doesn't know that they can get a tree from the municipality, and then it's a win-win thing. They get a tree, and the municipality furthers their project.
Yeah. 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 Are they getting who's buying the tree though?
I think it's probably the out of the public purse. I'm
Oh, okay.
saying
Yeah.
Credit Valley Conservation has a lot of work going on.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
probably parallels, or at least partners with the city of Mississauga or Brampton
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of that conservation type work, it can be a little challenging because it really, and for our listeners, it really depends on the municipality. Same with the tree protection. Like, every municipality does tree protection differently. Every
Hmm.
municipality handles conservation differently. I can speak to, like, yeah, I won't blame my region, right? But not very much concern about it right now. So where I know it's much more serious, City of Toronto has much stricter rules, right? So it really kind of depends, and I'm sure if we have U.S. listeners, it's going to depend on your local situation as well. So yeah, so it's good for us, and that's something that homeowners, even though they may live in those municipalities, we may know more than they do, right? About what you can and
Hmm.
can't do.
Well, and some of them are in a rather challenging situation where they've bought older properties often that have quite a bit of tree stock, but there's been some neglect
Mm,
probably for a long time. The old
yeah.
house has come down. They've got permits and they've gone ahead and bought the property, rebuilt the house, and are in a position because of their permit situation that they've had to do an evaluation of the tree stock, take out what is failing or what was in the way of the building project,
Yeah.
and then are required to put down a hefty down payment or deposit towards the permits to get this permission on the condition they'll get the money back when they plant
Plant the
to
trees.
the municipality's very strict conditions.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they can do the house, they can do the contracting, and they come to this point in their permit thinking, boy, I put a lot of money into that. How am I going to get it back? What are they
Yeah.
asking me for?
Yeah. And
And
where do,
so I
or
have
if
done
it's, yeah.
I've done a
Sorry.
number of designs
Yeah.
that
Yeah. And
have addressed that.
yeah, and sometimes it's a huge number of trees, right? Some depending on what was taken down and the size of the property, and the homeowners are like, "Where? How can I put in 12 trees? Like, where am I going to do that?" Right?
Hmm. That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're usually a short list. Again, to your point,
Mhm.
municipalities operate differently. What
Yeah.
the town of Oakville does is not what Mississauga does, or Burlington.
Yeah.
You really have to go back to your municipality. Everything's online anyway, but sometimes it's confusing and difficult to read.
Hmm. Yeah. It really can be. So do you find well, this whole virtual thing, like you don't have to stay in those municipalities. Like, are you doing? How far away have you designed?
I did a design recently in Picton for a
Oh, okay.
returning client who had done the front of the house on the roadway, and there were some challenges being on that kind of roadway, and then contacted me last year to do the other side of the house involving a deck structure and some tricky business there because they were really almost on a cliff,
Mm.
honestly. But
Wow.
I love this kind of pursuit because every project, every design is brand new.
Yeah.
They have common features, all of them, but every canvas is brand new to me.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, I'm so glad that you've been able to make that work for you. I'm just, I have done some virtual, I've done some, um, but usually I do, if I can, I still, because I have one that I've worked on this winter in near Belleville, kind of out, like you said, Picton Way and stuff like that. But I tried to do like one site visit, so I drove all the way out there for to do measuring and photos on my own, and then relied on the clients for some more stuff. So yeah, so it's you can make it work, but I really have just focused on more staying in Durham region. So you've kind of inspired me a little bit to know that you can extend our reach if people want that. But it's not every customer that I think is thorough to take those photos and those
Correct.
measurements, right?
Hmm. Yes, sometimes the information isn't enough, but we usually find a way to make it work. There have been instances where the virtual turned into a site visit.
Ah, yes, yeah. And I'm sure they're understanding that if they realize that, I know you gave me this measurement, but it doesn't, like, just when I measure myself, right? I'm like, that doesn't look right. Like, I think I missed something, right? And go back to them and say, can you just double check this measurement? You know.
Hmm. Yes. Well, and to your point, I have to work in real numbers.
Mm,
I was trained to do hand drawing and that kind of, freehand work, and I can't do it with a computer program.
no, no.
So I'm usually working with very precise numbers, always, particularly where hardscape is involved. You really want to be sure about that.
Yeah.
And, trying to make all the spaces fit, whether they're, softscaping, which is planting and lawns and that kind of thing, and hardscaping, which is interlock decks, patios, so on and so forth. But I usually like to be the first person involved in the project because I think that in itself pays simply because the design, the space is considered as a whole. And then it leaves the customer in the kind of position they want to be, which is in complete control so that they're not vulnerable to upsell from other contracting down the way. And, we'll end up with disproportionate work where they've got too much hardscape, too much deck, too much something and not enough something else, which is usually the softscaping, and it's always considered to be the last thing to do. And it is the last thing to do, but it should be properly planned for along with everything else.
Yeah, so you gave me the answer before I asked you the question, so that's perfect, because my next question was to say, and I'm going to ask this of all the landscape designers I talk to, about why do you think it's important for homeowners to start with a landscape design? And I know you and I, like you just kind of answered it, but I know there's times where it can be quite challenging when we are not the first on the scene, right?
Absolutely.
And yes. The value that we bring when we start with the design, start with the plan.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've walked into a few situations where I'm coming in last, and I wish I'd been there first. But of course, it's too late, so I have to work with what's there and what's reasonable. Yes, I always encourage people to start with me. And I will give you that document that makes most of your decisions. I'll engage you in the creative process. A lot of people come into it and they're not really sure. And where this becomes very interesting, particularly in a site visit, is where you have typically a husband and wife or two partners. One is usually more, eager than the other. The other is just kind of, putting in the time and listening attentively, because they will be part of the financing, certainly.
I was going to say, but because they're the ones who care about the budget, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting. Usually I speak to them first and I get a sense for what's going on.
Yeah.
I arrive on site and we talk about this and we talk about that. And then partner A says this, partner B says that. And it's like, okay, we all have to work together on this because there are different priorities. And then there's the unforeseen. And how many times have I been on a site where we've been talking about, wouldn't this Japanese maple look good here? And what about that? And talking about plants. And suddenly the focus expands and suddenly it's a privacy issue. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just gesturing with my hand because that's okay. What usually happens.
Yes, no, we definitely talk with our hands.
And people sort of look up and around the space and say, what can we do about my absolute lack of privacy? I'm going to do all this stuff in my backyard space, but all these people have a front row seat.
Yeah.
What can we do? Happily, I have solutions.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I want to reiterate what we're both saying to our listeners about the importance of starting with a plan. And I also want, and see if this has happened to you before too, where people, they know they need a plan, but they see it as two separate, like maybe they see the garden separate from the hardscaping, right? So I get called in after the hardscaping's done because they knew what they wanted, right? Like they say, okay, well, we knew we wanted the walkway here. We knew we wanted the patio this size. So we started with that. And now we're calling you and, and it's so much harder to work. Maybe not in every case. Sometimes it is pretty straightforward. Or the pool, like a pool, that's a whole other show. Where then they'll say things like, well, now for privacy, I want mature trees to go between this patio and the fence. Meanwhile, the patio is like 18 inches from the fence. And it's like, well,
Exactly.
really mature trees have a root ball of 3 feet if we're lucky, right? Plus
Hmm.
allowing for whatever, right? So
That's right.
if we were there initially, we could have accommodated for that, right?
That's right. Yeah, you'd be steering in a different direction for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Uh, yeah, and that's a very, very common perception. Unfortunately, too much of the hardscape industry considers the planting an afterthought, or they're not
yeah,
personally involved, or they're involved in a limited way because they'll take the work and pretty well plunk the plants in at the end. I don't mean that as a criticism, but I'm
yeah.
telling you, this is how I see it from my vantage point. And
Hmm.
the preferable thing to do is to have a design in place that basically bypasses all that possibility.
Right, right. And the other thing is, I think contractors, landscapers that do the hardscaping, they are very good at, well, not all of them, but most of them, doing exactly what the client asks for. Client wants a 16 by 14 patio, they're going to put in a 16 by 14 patio. They're not going to question them. Does your patio furniture fit on a 16 by 14 patio or a 10 by 10 patio?
Correct.
Do you know what I mean? So I
Hmm.
think that is one thing that as designers, we may start out, listening and getting that input from our clients, but we have the ability to kind of push back and say, you know, should it be bigger? Why can't it be bigger? Or maybe it doesn't need to be that size, and kind of really look at the big picture where the guy doing the patio is like, well, that's same with like a 3 foot front walkway, right? Like, well, they
Hmm.
wanted a 3 foot front walkway, but they need a 4 to 5 foot front walkway for the scale of their house. Well, but they
Hmm.
asked me for, so they're not happy with your they're not happy with their front entrance now, but they
Yeah,
can't kind
not
of
big enough.
pinpoint what it is, and they want us to
Hmm.
fix it with plans. But really, the issue is they have a really 2.5 story house, and they have a 3 foot wide walkway that you have to walk single file,
Hmm.
right? And so I think that's in a good way what we the contractors have the skill and they can do exactly what the homeowner wants, but that's not necessarily what what's the right thing to do, right? Like that's
Exactly.
you
Hmm.
need the fresh perspective of a designer.
You do. And to add to that, I've seen instances recently where people have engaged hardscape contracting, to do things that were not bylaw compliant.
Ah,
And where this really hits a wall, sometimes literally,
literally.
is that a neighbor will object to a project after the fact because they were not consulted. The homeowners decided this would be a good thing to do, brought a couple of contractors in, got a quote, and said, okay, go ahead. And then found out later, when the neighbor told them so, that this was not bylaw compliant. They should have looked it up on the website, the municipal website, and found out what the deal was with such improvements. This is going to be a big thing of the future. It already is, particularly
Yeah.
where you get situations where people have expanded parking on site
Mm,
and
yeah.
created spaces for, say, a third car.
Yeah.
And a lot of neighbors don't like that.
Mm,
These are things that really can create a lot of bad blood in a
mm,
neighborhood. And I have personally seen situations with neighbors of mine where ultimately it got so ugly in the end between an argument about a tree or the
mm,
hardscape walkway that it was too big, that eventually somebody got fed up and moved.
yeah.
Shouldn't be that way.
No, it shouldn't.
I've also seen instances more recently, and I think this is probably the even bigger problem because now we have flooding issues,
Yeah,
and
the water.
flooding is the huge problem of the future.
Mm-hmm.
I live in a neighborhood that never had flooding problems. Now we've had flooding problems. Add to that, a newer owner decided to do things in his backyard that were not bylaw compliant or really
Yeah.
considerate of his immediate neighbors. He didn't even
Yeah.
probably realize what he was doing and did
Yeah.
work that basically pushed water off his property and onto
Yeah.
three others,
Yeah. He
which
raised the
resulted in
grade.
flooding in their basements.
Yeah.
This is completely inappropriate. And that's something for those people to work out. Add to that, I'd also like to mention, and I do this all the time now, on my designs, I put on Ontario One Call. And
Oh,
that's to
okay.
support the government cause to get home ownership to do locates before anybody puts a shovel in the ground,
Mm,
which, as you know, can save a lot of time and trouble. And if it isn't done, does create a lot of
yeah.
headache and trouble and expense for people too, unnecessarily. So I like to be part of that cause because a lot of people, particularly if they're new owners or they this is their first house, they don't know such things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's true.
really, the whole design process is by taking careful, considered, and measured steps towards a solution, a documented solution that will give them the confidence to move forward on their project for the short term, the long term, and help them control the costs.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, do you deal with, so usually my so that's good to know, and that's something I'm going to definitely keep in mind. Um, I usually, if clients want to proceed with installation, I usually match make them with a contract, one of my kind of preferred contractors, and then they usually kind of take care of that one call. But
Yes.
that's good for them to know that they need to do that, right?
hmm Well, it's now I think the government's preference that the homeowner take the initiative. It's not nothing wrong with the contracting doing that, but
Yeah.
it will take longer for the contracting to get that appointment, whereas the homeowner, it's free of charge. There's no reason not
Yes.
to do it. And if you're
Yeah.
the homeowner, you're express through.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yes,
Excellent.
that is good to know. Contractors, of course, will do it. Good contracting will always know
Always do
this.
it. Yeah. And with
And
the
and to
insurance
add,
these days, they absolutely have to, right?
absolutely. And good contractors will want design to work from. They really don't want to go and haggle out the design process and, draw it on the back of a napkin or, whatever
Yeah.
people were doing. It's a huge relief to contracting, I find, when I hand over my finished design. I usually black and white and color. And by the way, I do Dynascape color as well, which helps people
Yes.
understand
Yeah.
the aesthetic side of the design. But the black and white 2D will have the plant list on it or separately if it's,
Yeah.
the design is
Larger.
that big. It becomes a document that they can work from easily. There are no questions or very few questions.
Mm,
I don't design officially to scale, but it almost always is to scale. And then
okay.
we bypass the problems of the future where the wrong tree goes in and down the road it's an ungainly, expensive monster,
Mm,
expensive to remove.
right.
This kind of thing. But back to the contracting. Contractors, good contracting will love this kind of documentation because they can work from it easily. They can do the estimates properly to a correct dollar value.
Yeah.
There's no mysteries. There's no, oh, okay, well, we have to talk about that. It really smooths a lot of the future path over.
Yeah. And it saves the clients money, doesn't it?
hmm
Because the
Absolutely.
contractor can provide a proper quote because they've got the linear footages, the square footages of everything, like even down to the mulch, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that brings up the matter of sustainability. I don't know if that was one of your questions, but
Yeah.
I support sustainable practice in all ways, natural mulch. One of the first things I do is I take plantings off the foundation of the house and away from any concrete, to give the plants a fighting chance. I
Okay.
insist on soil amendment. I'm trying often not to get rid of grass, but, make the garden spaces larger simply
Hmm.
because that takes rainwater and puts it where it needs to be, and that's straight in the ground and mitigates
Yeah.
flooding. And also, I make a point of suggesting to people that they harvest all that valuable rainwater that's hitting their roof and put it in their garden and channel it in. Free water, free rainwater. Beautiful. There are
Ah,
things we can do that are very simple and low energy and lasting.
okay. Excellent. So are you so that's Fusion Landscape, like are you a Fusion Landscape professional like to do the
Um, Not
mm,
by accreditation, but in
okay.
practice, I am. Yes.
Okay, great. I'd like to learn more about that too, because yes, that is it is a shame for all that water just to roll off the property, right? And or into the drains instead. Although I think most municipalities now we've had to disconnect, right, from the sewers and
Yeah,
which is a good thing, but we still want the water to be put to use, right? To go into the proper place. So,
absolutely.
um,
Absolutely. And I mean, we're all complaining about the snow this month, but
mhm,
this is paying it forward. We're in for another
yeah,
hot summer, apparently. All that
yeah,
snow will become groundwater. We won't recognize it at the time, but we have had situations, not often in this part of Canada, but we have drought occasionally. And drought is hugely destructive, just like
yeah,
flooding is, really. It's
yeah,
the flip side of flooding. I usually ask people, what they're doing in the summer, not because I'm so interested in their travel plans, but because if I'm designing a garden for them and they're going to be gone at the worst moments when the garden is choking it with thirst,
yeah,
I want to know that. So
yeah,
I'm choosing different plants that have
mhm,
drought tolerance and or suggesting to them that they might engage in an irrigation system or at least have
yeah.
a backup plan. So when they're at the cottage for 2 weeks and
I was
it's
just say those
35 degrees
cottagers,
here,
man, right?
yes. So, but to that point, sustainability is for everybody and everybody
Hmm.
can engage in it in different ways, whether through your municipality, your backyard, put some pollinator plants in the garden, show your kids how you're
Yeah.
doing it. Bring your kids into it. Make them love nature. Make them, you know, show them how awesome it is to see pollinators, hummingbirds, if you get them, come through your
Oh,
garden.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's there's so much potential out there, and to me, gardening, landscaping, gardening, is the purest form of optimism. It really
Oh,
is.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
I think that's why so many people got into it in the pandemic, right? Because everybody
Mhm.
needed something to be optimistic about. And I think that was, again, an upside, is it got people outside and it got them looking at their yards and and treating that outside space as a living space.
Absolutely. And I applaud certain municipalities who are doing great things,
Yeah.
like Kitchener, for example, have taken the sides of major roadways, that slope, that grassy slope that, is always on the side of the road somewhere, and they've turned them into pollinator corridors.
Oh,
It's
wonderful.
amazing, all this grass that otherwise would just be mowed and be costing money to support.
I think of the DVP, right? Like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, and they have to close the DVP to mow that grass. And I'm thinking, can't we do something else?
Well, I think we will be doing something else. Again, we raise the point of municipalities and their participation. Some places are doing it better than others.
Yeah.
I have heard anecdotally that some municipalities are now requiring people to use natural mulch, natural soil to get away
Hmm.
from chemical use. These are all very, very good things, and suggesting that they've reduced their their surface grass because now we all know it costs a lot of money to maintain.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, so I think that's something, an offshoot of what we do for our clients is helping them improve the environment, right? Because we're
Hmm.
looking, like they may not have the knowledge, and some do. Like I'm finding much more people are more aware of these issues, right? Everybody's asking about native plants, about bees, but we can that's something else that a landscape designer brings to the table on and helping you improve all of that for your own family as well as for your whole neighborhood,
Hmm.
right? And that
Absolutely.
supporting the environment is really important. And even though everybody's like little area is so small in the sense of the whole big world, but it's got to start somewhere. So I think
It does.
that's a wonderful thing that we can contribute, right?
Yes. Well, I'm a great fan of Monty Don, who you probably know
Oh
of.
yes,
Yes, king of the BBC and the gardening shows. He's
yes.
fantastic. And one of the points that was made, one of the many things I learned from that program, was in England there was an initiative to get homeowners. And these are people who probably have very small gardens. They're not
Oh
called
yeah,
yards in England, they're gardens.
yeah.
Anyhow, to take their garden spaces and to support pollinators and, sustainable practice and make more of their gardens because collectively they add up to a lot. There's a lot of people living on a very small island, and collectively they add up to a lot of support for the right kind of initiative. Now in Canada, we're kind of the opposite, of course. We're a small population in a very large country. However, we tend to be clustered very densely in certain population corridors like the GTA, Southern Ontario, Lower Mainland Vancouver, Montreal. So, in a way, that kind of applies to us too. And we need to support what's around us. We need to be more aware. We need to love it so we can tell our politicians that we want our conservation to be a priority. We want our green spaces to be a priority. We want our flooding to be mitigated in natural ways and not necessarily only through infrastructure. We got to be participants in this. Really, we do.
We do. Well, that's great. That brings up some really great points. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I hope we're communicating everyone to the value that we can bring, and that even though there is a charge for our services, we will save you a lot of money in the long run, won't we?
Absolutely. And many years ago, my husband and I engaged a designer to come in and do work for us because honestly, we couldn't make up our minds. We knew nothing. We couldn't agree, so on and so forth. I'm doing that now in the exterior of people's properties. And I never forgot the amazing realization that when you bring someone who actually knows things, knows where things should be, what color they should be, can just, good design is invaluable. And happily, I've been able to work with some people who were very, very good designers and told me what I should want, because I had no idea. And I was so appreciative because the results were just amazing. It was far better than I imagined.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I can do that for people, I'd be happy to do that. That would give me a lot of personal satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I hope I can do that. I've designed small and large properties. I've been on acreage. I've done small urban lots that were, 20 by 20? And
Do you have a
somebody's front lawn.
favorite? Do you have a favorite? Like, what's your sweet spot? Like, do you have a favorite? I know I was speaking to my last designer, John, really likes, John Bright. I'll mention John. He really likes small spaces. So do you have a preference?
Sometimes small spaces can be more challenging because there's usually a longer list of requirements. The ones that I've done that were downtown properties usually came with things that people who live in the suburbs like me have no idea about. And they were saying things to me, the clients were saying things like, okay, I have problems with people walking their dogs and using my lawn, and I don't like it. How can we diplomatically discourage that? What can we do? What can we plant there? Or, I don't want a front lawn. I don't like front lawns. I'm done with that. Fill it with plants and give me low maintenance.
Yes.
And sometimes it starts with no maintenance, but there really is no such thing. But my initiative is always to create the least amount of work for clients.
Yeah.
Because everybody is very busy. They don't want to be out every weekend doing something to that garden. If things are installed properly from the get-go and mulched properly and the soil's amended and the right plants are there, it should work for them because they don't want to work for their gardens. They expect the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is true too. Because usually that's the first thing people say is I want low maintenance. And I always joke, I have a thing where I always joke and go, oh, really? No one's ever asked me for that before. And they're all like, oh yeah. So that is definitely something. There is still we can't give you plastic plants, and even if we gave you plastic plants, you still have to wash them, so there's still maintenance, right?
Well, I try to keep the list of necessary chores to the absolute minimum, and say to them, look, if you did things right from the get-go, the maintenance should not be a big deal at all. We can make a lot of things right from the start. And we can work with what's there too. I mean,
Yeah.
I always try to keep plants that have something to offer in the future on site, unless the client says otherwise.
Yeah.
Trees, certainly. I want to
Oh, for
support
sure.
trees as well. I want to get the grass off the trees, you know.
Yeah.
These types of things that seem very simple, but really add up in the long run.
Yeah. I do want to mention about you mentioned about property value too, like the value that we can bring is not just aesthetics, like we can really affect the value of your property, right?
Absolutely. In ways that you can see easily and ways that perhaps aren't so obvious. So, property values, well, it was the real estate industry that was saying a number of years ago, and I believe continues to, that any landscape investment, dollar wise, comes back to you at full dollar value. I think people are surprised because other
Yeah.
things don't necessarily do that. Like a pool
Yeah.
installation will not give you that. You put a pool in because you want it.
Yeah.
But with landscape design, professional landscape design, of course, you will get full dollar return. If you buy quality plants and things are done appropriately up front, you will get full dollar. In fact, you'll get more than that because, of course, it will get bigger and better with time. Also, trees now factor in large mature trees on your property. Things you probably didn't have anything to do with, but are there, are considered valuable in the thousands of dollars because of their flood mitigation, the fact that they are mitigating flooding. Those massive root systems that you can't possibly see are doing their job, pulling all that water from the surface. They're offering shade. They're reducing cooling costs. They block the wind in the winter, so on and so forth. So trees are very, very valuable, and that's why municipalities are so keen to plant more of them. Also, your resale potential, always goes up because you've done these things. And not only have you enjoyed them for as long as you've been on a property, they will be an asset selling the property as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had some where the clients hadn't finished, like they did some of the design installation, but hadn't completed it. And for whatever reason, they sold their house. But they literally, like, when you went to visit the house, like on an open house, they had the landscape design displayed, also like this is,
Oh,
so that's already
love
done
it.
for them too. So that's something that can be, transferable. And I know the clients have come back to me to say, I'm so sorry this happened. We got a transfer and we decided to go for it. But the design is so beautiful. We left it for the next people, that type of thing. So it really is an investment. And, and we really, everything we do about our job is to make, the environment better, the clients more successful. It's a great job to have, isn't it?
It is. It's terrific. It's so creative. I so enjoy the clientele.
Yeah.
People are wonderful. They're very excited about going forward, and seeing things that perhaps weren't so obvious. And they're saying, "Wow, I'm really keen on this now. I'm
Yeah.
happy to do this." Another thing is that as designers, we can connect them with not only contracting but certainly quality plant supply, which of course is very much a changing situation as well. The
Yeah.
industry has changed so much before and after the pandemic, and then, and now we're in a position where people are wanting to buy Canadian. It's a political thing now. They want
Yeah.
Canadian supply, and sometimes that's easy. The supply itself is Canadian grown, but didn't start here. Maybe that's a problem for people. I don't know. There's a big push on to plant native plants, but unfortunately, as great as native plants are and necessary, they don't do the work of ornamental planting. And people will be disappointed and wonder
Yeah.
why that thing only bloomed for 2 weeks and what have I got now?
Yes. Yeah.
This is another part of the design process to steer people towards a reasonable kind of understanding of what they can have.
Yeah.
We try very much to do
Or
2
should
and
have,
3.
right? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. We try for multi-season appeal, give them, value for dollar. I pretty much stick to perennials and shrubs and trees because they are permanent plantings.
Yeah. Me too.
plants are very expensive now. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness. So, you don't want to be hauling things back to the nursery the following year. Add to that that warranties are inconsistent as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to buy from quality supply who will back up. But usually, anybody who's warranting the stuff is giving you a quality product anyway, if you see what
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
A lot of people are coming to me and asking for recommendations for something they found online. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I don't know this. I can't possibly recommend it. My personal inclination is to buy from someone you're talking to face.
Yeah.
But, big supply, there's a lot of supply here in the GTA. They're good people. They have warranties. They will
Yeah.
deliver, they'll support you. But you have to pay a reasonable dollar for it.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely get what you pay for, in plant
Mm-hmm.
material. And if the prices seems like pretty low, then it's like, yeah, you get what you pay for. Do you facilitate that at all? Because I also think one of my other questions was, do you think it's important for landscape designers to be involved in the material choices and the plant choices? Like, um, do you get involved in much of that for your clients?
Depending on what's necessary, I always try to set them up with, well, I always provide a plant list
Yes.
and sometimes options if it comes up later that, I never get into things that are difficult to source. I don't go there. It's
Yeah.
not worth it. Set somebody up for a Japanese maple they can't possibly have. No, why do it? So I'll go for something a bit more popular and accessible. And even if people insist on certain types of product, I say, it doesn't really grow well in your
Yeah.
climate. Be aware of that. Yeah, you can buy it, but maybe your heart will be broken because
Yeah.
you really wanted it and it's just not suited to where you live. And there are plants like that, sure. And people don't always understand that live in climate zones that are so uniquely different, even in the same municipality. If you
Yeah.
live down by Lake Ontario, you've got a different soil composition. You can grow all kinds of stuff, and it's warmer down there. You live in Brampton, where you're higher up. The soil is completely different. Parts of Oakville have this horrible red clay. Oh my gosh. Very
Hmm.
difficult situations to grow lots of different plants. So, it helps to have a plant list that has been thought through
Right.
and always with a mind to what will thrive in the spot, not just survive. Again, people want their money spent wisely, and so they should.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, that's great. I mean, this has been a wonderful conversation. Do you have I know you had a few things. Do you have anything else that we missed? I've got one last question I'm going to ask everybody, but is there
Okay.
something else that you want to make sure we cover?
Well, all I can say is good design, good professional design leads to good installation and happy results.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
to me, if I was, and of course I'm speaking at this point from my angle, but if I was starting fresh, I would want to have a complete plan
Too.
and a thorough understanding of where the limits are. And now people are spending a lot of time online. They're looking at plants, they're looking at Pinterest, which has, so many great ideas. But the problem becomes when they say, gee, I have to have that, or I want that plant. And they don't
Yeah.
understand it doesn't grow here
Yes.
or supply, particularly when you're getting into things like water features and whatnot. It's really out of reach. You're dealing
Hmm.
with a lot of offshore offerings. You're dealing with websites that are in the United States. It isn't obvious at first. There's no way you can buy that thing, but it's impossible to ship here.
Yes. Yeah.
There
And
are
even within
reasonable
Canada,
plants.
right? Like, because what we
Hmm.
can grow, like, the plant can be, it might look beautiful in that home in British Columbia on Vancouver Island, but that doesn't mean it's going to grow in Pickering, right? Like,
No,
or it may grow, but it may stay alive, but it doesn't mean it's going to look like it did on Vancouver Island, right?
no,
So
certainly
yeah,
not.
so that's
Certainly
something to
not.
consider.
Well,
Consider.
we have very severe differences in climate zones. What you
Hmm.
can do up north, and I've done some cottage properties as
Yeah.
well for people. I've done design for their homes, and then a cottage property comes up. Last year I had I had a bit of fun. The problem was how to keep the Canada geese off the waterfront of
Oh
this
no.
property. And when I don't know something off the top of my head or haven't experienced it before, I usually research it as best I can
Yeah.
and did come up with a natural planting solution to get the geese to go somewhere else.
Really?
Yes,
Thorny? Did it involve thorns? What did it involve?
it involved plant choices. It involved getting rid of the grass, which is what they love ever so much. But
Oh,
this geese flock had become a perennial nuisance, and this particular guest or client rather said, I have to get these monsters out of here. How
yeah.
can I do it? And so I was able to come up with a planting plan, a deep plan, mind you. You know, it involved 20 feet because geese are very selective and you don't get rid of them easily. When they like a place, that's it.
Wow.
I've also done deer resistant
Hmm. Can be
design
challenging
where
too,
the
right?
priority was to keep them out, not always doable, but in the end, we ended up planting the things they like least. So they'll be steered to go elsewhere in the
Yeah.
deep of winter and won't nibble the cedars or whatever they
Hmm.
were up to.
Yeah.
Hydrangeas are also a favorite of theirs.
Yeah.
So,
Ewes too. I love ewes, and oh my God, they love the ewes, right?
exactly. So, to your point earlier about being a problem solver,
Yeah.
these are things that come up in the interview. The interview can be done on site. The interview can be virtual. I start a design and I do a first draft, and then we kind of develop the finished
Hmm.
product from there.
Yeah.
And
From
at
there.
that point, I finish it. I send enlargements to the client. I put color on it, which everybody likes because they
Yes.
understand it better usually at that
Yeah.
point. And then they can go off and arrange their contracting. I try to set them up if that's suitable. I usually try to connect them with supply as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. My last question, and I'm going to ask all my fellow landscape designers, is that we're going to end on is what is your favorite tree to add to a landscape?
Oh my goodness. I have to say, I'm very partial to Japanese maple. I actually invested in one with yellow twigs that, I don't know, I just fell in love and I had to have it.
Oh, no, that's great.
So right now, that is my favorite. It's more of a shrub actually than it is a tree,
Yeah.
but I had a bad spot that I had to do something better with, and I thought, I want something there I'm going to look at and love every time I see it.
Oh,
That's what I
yeah.
want. And unfortunately, being in this line of work, the
Mhm.
choices are infinite.
Yes.
You could be looking
Yeah.
for trees for years, but I finally
Yeah.
settled on one and I'm so happy. It gives me such pleasure to see that. I hope I can provide that to my customers as well, my
Oh,
clients,
great.
and give them something they'll look at and say, wow, I just love looking at that.
Yes.
It just
Oh,
gives me such pleasure.
excellent. Well, that's a great choice. And it's a good way to remind our listeners that there's more than one. There's not like when you say Japanese maple, it doesn't mean a blood good that everybody has, right? Like there
Oh,
are so many beautiful Japanese maples. Um, and there's one for every property, right? And size and scale and color and uniqueness. So I think that's a great suggestion, or it's great to hear that that's one of your favorites. So um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
so thank you so much, Rita. This has been really fun, and I think it's wonderful that to learn how we all operate and do different things. So I love learning about how you do virtual design, and I think that's what a fabulous service to offer to your clients. So thank you so much for joining me here, and I'm excited about this series where I'm going to talk to different landscape designers and just to really re-educate our homeowners and our listeners on just the importance of landscape design and how many touch points we cover, right, in our careers. So thank you
Well,
for
thank
joining
you.
me here today.
That's been my very great pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening, and I will have all of Rita's contact information in our show notes as well, so you can find her. And thank you everyone once again for joining me down the garden path.